After getting blanked by the Arizona Coyotes 6-0, the Minnesota Wild, for by my count the third time this season, had a closed door meeting. So I think it's safe to say we are fully back to square one with the Minnesota Wild season this year. The insanity continues, and we will dive into a bunch of different questions, including where's the direction? Where are the answers for all of the questions that are being asked about this season so far? We'll discuss on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked on Wild.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. We thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week or any of the YouTube conversation. Come be part of the People's Podcast by joining in on YouTube every day. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we take a look at going back to square one for the Minnesota Wild here this season. We'll talk about yet another closed door meeting, going through the motions for large stretches of games this season, and we'll try to get an answer on where's Bill Guerin in all this? Where are the answers to the questions that are continuing to pop up with how this team has played all season? My name is Seth Topal, daily Minnesota Wild insider, credentialed member of the Minnesota Wild Media Group, and we once again are not going to be able to have a victory Micheletti Monday here today, but Alex Micheletti does join us as always to break down another lackluster weekend for the Minnesota Wild. Alex, take your pick. I mean, the Philadelphia game, you blow a 2-goal lead in the third period and you lose in overtime. I guess that's preferable to what happened against Arizona, where the Wild get blanked. And I want to start right off the bat with what we learned after the game, that there was yet another closed door meeting. And I saw a lot of reaction to this. I'm just gonna go to Judd Zulgad for this one. He said on Twitter, if you have to have a closed door meeting more than once in a season, it didn't work the first time, and you should just abandon any future attempts. We're back to square one for this season.
Yeah, I put it out on Twitter too. It seems like they're quitting on two coaches now, which is crazy to think, right? And every like situation that you think that they're going to pull themselves out of it, it continues to snowpile. And Arizona was coming in fresh, so the Wild were on the back end of a back-to-back, and it just seemed like they were rushing guys back. Gus did not look anywhere ready to go, and Kirill, at points he looked like he was the Kirill, and then others, it was extremely quiet. And you let a guy like Nick Bukestad get a hat trick too, who hadn't scored in a month plus, which is just crazy. And Clayton Keller almost made it 2 hat tricks in a game, which I've never seen, to have 2 guys have 2 separate hat tricks. So yeah, just you can't really make it up. And these games are at home too. To have just 2 doozies back to back at home was really tough.
It's embarrassing. And Nick Bukestad, he had the 3 goals. I'll do you one better. He had the 3 goals in 28 minutes of game action. So he did it in not even a period and a half against the Wild. And it frankly, like, I'm not going to suggest that players are not trying,
Mhm.
because players get it, but it's what I am going to say is visually it looks like the team has given up.
Yeah.
Like, it looks like the team has given up again,
Halfway
because
through the season, which
you
is
have large stretches of time in which it just looks like players are going through the motions. There are some guys on the team that continue to try, and are being put in positions to have to do way too much now, as we'll talk about with Brock Faber here coming up in a little bit. But, like, the thing that I think irks me the most is we really have not heard anything from the leadership of this team, Bill Guerin in particular, other than before the Sweden trip, in which the message was, we have to be better. And we are at the exact same point as a team. The Wild are at the exact same point as a team as they were before the Sweden trip. And we continue to we continue to not hear anything. Russo was on with Dan Barrero for his Sunday sermons bit, which was just it was a bleak 30-minute segment. Like, props to Russo for telling it how it is. And I encourage you to go back and listen to it. We will summarize a lot of what was said, but I had to turn my phone off after listening to that and just, like, quietly kind of reflect. But he's absolutely right. Like, Guerin has made, since the HR complaint that led to Andrew Heights being and the organization agreeing to part ways, he's made one. He has answered one request for comment. He has not done any radio hits. He has not done any appearances on the NHL Network or any of those others in which he was just widely accessible when things were going good. But here's the thing. You don't get to be visual when things are going well.
right.
You don't get to enjoy, like, live in the enjoyment of this type of situation and then just completely disappear when things aren't going well. You don't get to do it that way, because there are a ton of questions that need to be answered, and silence is not an answer.
No, he assembled this team. He did the buyouts, and then which led to extensions for guys and no movement deals within those contracts. And what's new in the CBA is when you hand out those extensions, the no trade clause goes on the current contract, which Russo talked about in his hit, which makes things a nightmare because when you hand out those extensions, you can't just say, if things go bad right away, you can't, try to make up for your mistake by trying to move them, because you can't. It's up to the player to waive it, and not up to the GM anymore. If they feel like they made a mistake right away, which it looks like it's a giant mistake for a lot of the contracts that he's made recently, extensions. Because it seemed like he rushed into them. He could have waited, but he didn't. He got them done, right? All of them, right? It's crazy.
And I'm gonna give a small amount of the benefit of the doubt here, because I think a part of this puzzle that is a problem is the fact that the continued goal for this franchise continues to be to get to the postseason.
Right.
And so I can see the logic. I can see the mindsets that went into all of that, is that we are going to have a better opportunity to get to the postseason with these vets than we would by playing a ton of rookies. Because I think what's also in these extensions, what we're also getting is that a lot of these impact prospects are not as close as we were told to be able to help this group. And so it's a double whammy. It's a double whammy disaster class here, because your prospects that you anticipate that we laud this prospect system all the time for having as many good players as they do. But beyond those top guys in the system that are not ready to help now, you really don't have anything, especially on defense, as we'll talk about here in a little bit. And so it's a deadly like 1-2 combo of just prioritizing a group. We got to be honest here too. 2 seasons ago, it was an abnormally high rate of scoring. Everybody had the career seasons. I think it's pretty safe to say at this point that was not sustainable.
No.
And what happened last year? You get Vezina caliber goaltending all season. It like just look at the difference in, say, penalty kill, for example. It's the same group of players. We saw stretches last year of this penalty kill being bad. It's just the goaltenders made far more saves last year. They're not making near that many saves this year. We're seeing all this same things. It's just that for 2 straight seasons, it's been masked by 2 different things that were completely unsustainable.
And the difference this year too is they have guys playing in roles that they shouldn't be in and elevated spots. They have guys that shouldn't be in the NHL right now playing, and it's just it's so frustrating. And then like you talked about too, and when have you ever heard anything about defenders in Iowa? It's been quiet. Nothing on Lambos, nothing on O'Rourke. So it's just that's kind of frightening too when they need all the defensive help in the world. And they also, Russo talked about this in his hit too. Where's the playing time for Daemon Hunt too? you have him called up to not play. It just, it makes no sense, because that's not helping his development either. If you want him to make
sitting
the team
on the bench.
if you want him to make the team fully next season, him just sitting on the bench, not playing in Iowa, just sitting there, it's not helping anybody.
Yeah, it's just a multi-layered large failure by the organization to get to this point. And look, I get it. By having a team that is closer to playoff caliber, you theoretically then fill more seats. You have the opportunity for playoff game. I understand how the money side of it works, but I get tired of when it doesn't happen, or when you have a season like last year where you get bounced in the first round of the playoffs for the 99 billionth time in a row. We automatically go back to things that are pretty regular things that teams have to deal with. Now, Parise Suter, that was self-inflicted, but that's always pointed to anytime there's any sort of postseason failure or the team not being able to live up to their own self-imposed aspirations of making the playoffs. The finger is always pointed to, well, what do you expect with $14 million in dead cap? Like, yeah, I get that. That's a thing, but you also don't have to double down on the fact that we have to get to the playoffs. Like, I think everybody would have been just fine if during these 2 seasons, and now you're probably going to have to do this anyway.
Right.
I think everybody would have been just fine over these next 2 seasons if you just say the reality of the situation is that it's too daunting to be able to get to the postseason. And so we're really going to dig in. We're going to try to evaluate what we have to see what we need. Like, I feel like I've been screaming that into a microphone ever since last season ended. And yet we'll be better this year. We'll be better than we were last year. Everybody's going to be better. You're one of the worst teams in the NHL. And so at some point, you just have to step up to a microphone and accept that this is where things are at, and that there are going to have to be some hard decisions made, to get yourself out of this if you want to be a postseason team next year, which again, I don't think is an attainable goal.
No, it's a good analogy is, the NFL playoffs started this past weekend, and you see how far away the Vikings are compared to even some of the the teams in the own division. The Lions and the Packers both won, and so those are teams that you play all the time. And I take a look at with the Wild here. Are they anywhere near Dallas? No. Are they anywhere near Colorado? No. Winnipeg? Probably not. So it's just like that is very scary too. And though all those teams have had injury issues too. The Avalanche don't have their captain still in Gabe Landeskog. Dallas was without Ottinger for a while. Winnipeg has not had Kyle Connor for a month, and they just continue to win. And they might have a little bit less talent than the Wild overall when they're both teams are fully healthy, but they just continue to win, and fight through everything. And it's just sad to see like you said, the Wild just going through the motions. And these past two games, I mean, Philly and Arizona, those are winnable games, and they were at home.
Incredibly
winnable, and just piss poor effort. Just the most frustrating was the Philly, because they had that 3-1 lead, and it was going to set up a picture perfect moment for Marc-Andre Fleury to get the win and pass, Patrick Waugh for second all time, and goalie wins, and they just threw it all away, and this team too, when they face adversity from the refs, they just don't handle it.
They wilt, not Wilt Chamberlain,
right?
Wilt like a wet pasta noodle.
They just can't fight through it. It gets in their heads, and it just that's what's really frustrating. You see a guy like Matt Zuccarello take that penalty. It just you can't make that mistake. And it just they let it get in their heads, and that was bam. They Philly wins. And that led into Arizona, and you knew right away when Arizona scored immediately that it was not good. I tweeted it too. I was like, this is going to get ugly, and it quickly got ugly. They had no chance after the first period. It was like you said, the second and third they were just like, how can we get this? Is there running time? Like
I was clamoring like 8 minutes into the game for running time the rest of the game.
Yeah, because when Nick Bukestad is sniping, it's just like that. The best thing that the Wild fans had at that game against Arizona was the Matt Dumba tribute. That was the most. That was the only time they could really cheer.
Yeah, that was the only thing that there was to cheer for, other than the guy that hypes the crowd up and throws all the T-shirts. Like, that's about it. We got to talk about a very concerning trend that is starting to be common too often with Brock Faber. The Wild are running him into the ground, and so we'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are here, and there is still time for you to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 if in bonus bets, win or lose. So for today, you can head to the Wild and Islanders matchup, throw $5 on the New York Islanders to win, and then you get $150 in bonus bets to throw on same-game parlays. If you want to take the second period over between the Wild and the Islanders, you certainly can do that. You can find other bets in the new Explore tab, and you can put together an unbeatable parlay in the Parlay Hub. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. For our wonderful listeners, keep an eye out this week as we've got some exciting news that we'll be sharing on how you can be even more involved in Locked on Wild. Stay tuned as we iron those details out, and we'll make sure to tell you about how you can get more involved in Locked on Wild as we trudge forward through the mud of what is already a lost season. And Alex, it's more frustrating, I think, because it was something that has been noticed over the last few games that Brock Faber just has not, over the last handful of games, just hasn't looked as sharp as he did in the early part of the season. Well, gee, I wonder why. You have a stretch of games, and I've got his minutes log, and so let's just dial back all the way to the start of December, and this is when the Spurgeon and Brodin injuries started to become a real problem. In the month of December, I'm going to look at 25 minutes or more of ice time for Faber. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, including 7 straight games of 25 minutes or more. Also 30 minutes or more. 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the month of January, all of a sudden his his minutes have started to drop. He has 1 game of 30 plus minutes so far this month, and 2 games of 25 plus minutes, because we're starting to see some of that sharpness drop, because this is something that happens a lot because the collegiate season is substantially shorter than a full NHL season. Folks, it looks like the rookie wall is starting to hit again, which is super problematic because this has become a staple. I was actually surprised in looking at the recent minutes logs for various Wild defensemen. I was actually surprised that the minutes have been seemingly more evenly distributed, because at other points throughout this season, I mean, look at Dakota Mermis's usage in January. He has 3 games in which he played fewer than 14 minutes. In the win against the Montreal Canadiens on the 21st of December, he played 9 minutes. John Merrill has had games in which he has played fewer than 10 minutes quite often. You can't play 4 defensemen in the NHL. And so here's my point. Why are you playing 2 guys at the back end of the lineup that you are so concerned about getting exposed that you're limiting their minutes to 10, 11 minutes a night, when you have a young player in Daemon Hunt just sitting in the press box on a nightly basis? It is blasphemous for this team to continue to have Daemon Hunt up here literally collecting dust on the bench, while anytime you have anybody on that third pairing, it seems, touch the puck, it ends in disaster, or it ends in a penalty, or it ends in a careless turnover behind the net because you're not looking at where the puck is going, and you hesitate because you're trying to find somebody for so long that you end up just passing it to the other team anyway. Like, it defies logic that we continue to see the likes of 33 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think I'm being too harsh on these two, Russo flat out said that they probably shouldn't be on an NHL roster. And he's not wrong.
Right. And the justification that we hear is that Goligoski the reason why he's in the lineup is he has to be on the power play. No, he doesn't. He doesn't have to. And they they can survive without Alex Goligoski being on the power play unit. At this point in his career, he is not a power play guy. And the same thing with John Merrill. The reason why we hear that he's in the lineup, it's for him to be on the penalty kill. He can't help the penalty kill when he's the one taking the penalties. Both of those guys have taken penalties at the worst absolute times. We saw it in Arizona, the Arizona game. Merrill took multiple penalties. Arizona scored multiple times because of John Merrill mistakes. And he can't keep up with the pace of the game. And then when he can't, he is, lunging at guys, just, slashing, just taking the worst penalties, and you just see him, and it's like, here we go again. And, I'm sure his teammates are frustrated. It's, you have to feel bad for the goalies too, because they're just like, they have to look up and they see 4 and 33 out there. It's like, oh my gosh, here we go again, So it's just is not sustainable. And you see how much Brock Faber cares too. That Dallas game where he almost scored and he slammed his stick because he wanted that goal so bad, and the Wild were still in the game at that point. And then after that, it just snowballed, and it's like you said, they can't have guys that are young like Daemon Hunt, just sitting there. It hurts his development. And poor Jesper too. So many people were telling me that he should have, that he needs to play the entire game. I was like, no, get him out. It's demoralizing for him. And now that he gets demoted, I was like, oh man, it's too bad for Jesper too.
It's just like, again, it circles back to just all the way up to the top, all the way down to it is failures at every level.
Yep.
With everything that you needed to have during this season. And look, I understand that there has been kind of an abnormal rash of injuries this season, but you have you don't show any confidence in anybody to be able to step in and fill spots, because here's the other thing.
No, and nobody in the league, the rest of the league is not sorry for the Wild too.
No,
not at all.
Not at all.
Not especially in the Central Division. There are so many injuries. Chicago just lost Bedard for 2 months. They're not in the playoff race, but these teams continue to to continue to keep going, and
they at least keep it competitive in their games.
Yeah, they Anaheim is trying. Anaheim just lost Trevor Zegras for months, and they play teams hard. Dostal, he gets made fun of by a Toronto newspaper saying the no-name goalie, and just it's all these teams in the West. They keep fighting. It's a dogfight in this side of the NHL.
Yeah. And it's, as much, I love that this is going to be the segue, because as much as we just cut veins open and just go on tirades about all this stuff, if you are subscribing more to the greater good notion that we have been imparting here in 2024, this is going to be a great week for the Minnesota Wild to further their draft position, because we'll talk about what is on the schedule for this week, because oh boy, it's a mess. And so we'll finish by talking about that coming up here on Locked On Wild. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, if one of your New Year's resolutions in 2024 is to go to more concerts, go to more sporting events, PWHL in Minnesota is off to a fantastic start. maybe you want to check in on them like we will be as the season unfolds. Game Time can help you do that. And Game Time differs from many of your favorite ticket buying websites because they offer last-minute deals on the day of the event. You can find great deals on tickets the day of the event that you are headed to. They also offer views from every seat in the venue so that you can see exactly what you'll see from your spot in the arena. And you don't get blindsided by hidden fees anymore. Game Time will show you exactly what you're going to spend on your tickets, fees included, before you proceed to checkout. All of that leading to my main point, which is that Game Time can help take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to join us after today's game against the New York Islanders for another Locked On Wild postcast. Love the fact that we got an afternoon start for this game. Obviously, with it being a holiday for most in the public sector. Chance to go a little earlier in this one, so we won't be postcasting at 10:30 at night. No, we'll right during those playoff football games, we'll be taking the air. So make sure to hop in on the conversation and let your voice be heard here on Locked On Wild. Seth Topol and Alex Micheletti finishing off today's show, and Alex, 6th in the Tankathon standings as of right now, and an opportunity to maybe creep a little higher up because let's talk about the opponents this week. New York Islanders at home, and
they're a pain in the butt to always play against, and it'll probably be Sorokin and net, and he's such a hard goalie to go against.
And I know what we're gonna see. I'll put this out here, and I would bet money on it if I was a betting man. You're going to see a better start, but you're going to see this team be able to operate within the limits of a scoreless game. If it's scoreless, they're going to be able to do whatever. But at the moment the Islanders score, fold it up.
Can't handle the adversity.
No. And then what do we have after that? Oh, we've got the Florida Gauntlet, and now
who they just don't lose now.
No, all the flashbacks are coming to the January schedule preview, in which I talked about this Florida Gauntlet and was like, maybe we can get a point out of these games. You play Florida, who is number 2 in their division, one of the top teams in the East. They just continue.
Kachukka's on just a heater too.
Yeah, so you got that. You got the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then you have the Carolina Hurricanes. And I know the Carolina Hurricanes have not been as good this year as they were the last couple. But guess what the Carolina Hurricanes have that presents a major problem? Speed.
Yes.
And so
Sebastian Aho, hello.
You get a 4-game week here, and I maybe could see a point in these 4 games, but I don't see even just lining them up on paper, I don't see there being any way to beat the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. And so, greater good, this is a fantastic opportunity for the Wild this week to further dive in to said Tankathon standings. I just want to look because it's the closest team to the Minnesota Wild at this point, a team that they had to fight tooth and nail to beat in their most recent game. Let's see what the Columbus Blue Jackets, in their most recent head-to-head matchup, I should say. Let's see what the Columbus Blue Jackets have on the schedule this week. They play Vancouver today. at home. Then they play New Jersey on Friday. So they got a full week off in between games. So that gives an opportunity for the Minnesota Wild to keep pace at the very least. But then after that, next week, they go at Edmonton, at Calgary, at Vancouver, at Seattle. So there aren't many winnable games for the Blue Jackets either in this mix. But at the very least, if you go 0-4 this week, you're not going to jump out of 6th place. You're going to hold that down pretty good and maybe entrench it a little bit.
as we know in the Wild's history, they're good at just holding where they are.
Yeah, very much.
They love to do that, and they'll be playing. I mean, goalies that have always frustrated them too. You take a look at Vasilevsky and Bobrovsky. So we're going to face a trio of Russian, maybe 4 Russian goalies, because Carolina's got the young Russian too. So they could face an all 4 Russian goalie gauntlet. And so, yeah, either way with the Islanders, because they have 2 Russian goalies. They have Varlamov, who I think the Wild saw the last time these 2 teams played, and the Isles, as we saw from our buddy Johnny Lazarus, had the tweet where guys were in their last game against Nashville were walking off from the bench into the locker room when the game was still going. That is an awful look from pro athlete.
That's the one thing we haven't seen from the Wild this year. It's the one thing that we have yet to see. So with the Islanders, let's talk about this, because it was just like a welcoming party into the score sheet for pretty much every former Minnesota Wild player on the roster for the Coyotes on Saturday. And so who's it going to be for the Islanders here in this one today? I want to throw a prediction down.
Yep.
And we'll see if I am right here. Could it be Brock Nelson? With some potential opportunities here, War Roads all. That's who it's going to be. You know why? Hockey Day.
Yes.
Hockey Day, Minnesota in War Road. Brock Nelson is scoring a hat trick tonight, guaranteed. Book it.
And Anders Lee will help contribute. With the assists on the goals.
He'll have the points. He'll have the non-goals. Hey, another, I'm just going to throw this in here too. I love that we're leaning into Tankathon. Because this actually excites me. Listen to Buffalo's schedule this week, because Buffalo is 1 point ahead of the Wilds for 7th right now. Listen to Buffalo's schedule this week. They host the San Jose Sharks today. They host Chicago on Wednesday.
Oh, God.
They host Tampa Bay on Saturday. And then next week on Tuesday, they play the Anaheim Ducks. And then Saturday of next week, they play the San Jose Sharks again. Can you say separation?
Separation. Big time. Teams, when they see San Jose, they're like, all right. And Chicago too. I mean, Chicago, it's basically an all AHL roster now. It's unbelievable.
I'd like to give Chicago a crack with this roster and see who comes out on top.
They cannot end up with Macklin celebrating. It's just, we cannot have another Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves. We just can't see it. We can't.
No, you gotta send him to the Sharks.
Yeah.
Or to us.
Yes.
If we continue to I said in the January schedule preview, circle that Ducks game as a win. I erased
you can't anymore.
I erased the circle. I erased the circle and I'm like, can't have that anymore. So
I joked. I was like, you almost you could Trevor Zegras with a broken ankle could score at this point against the Wild.
Hey, greater good though.
Yes.
greater good, but with a stern tone. Let's eliminate some of the nonsense from the beginning of the episode. Let's get Daemon Hunt into a game,
Yes.
for crying out loud. Let's stop running Brock Faber ragged.
Right.
And I guess let's see if a third closed door meeting actually does the trick this time. Third time's the charm. I guess we'll see. That will do it for today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you have not already, and make sure to drop us a review on your favorite audio platform if you haven't already either. We appreciate all of the support from everybody that tunes in on a daily basis. We will continue to keep you covered with all of the Minnesota Wild news and notes you can handle as we continue to guide you through the rest of this season. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Ron Burgundy.